Hello, friends. My name is Avijit Sarkar, and today I'm going to have a discussion with Pankaj Upadhyay. People know him more as a filmmaker, as a videographer, but he's, I think, much more than that. I always felt that he's a true creative in the true sense of the word, and it's my great pleasure to welcome Pankaj to this discussion. Pankaj, I'd like to start with literature first. When did you start developing an interest in literature, and how did that happen?
Thank you, Dada, firstly, for having me, in front of you. I'm a little nervous at the moment, fielding your questions and also, giving a measured response that you like, and try to revisit, the memory lanes as I share my creative journey. But firstly, thank you for having me on the show, and thank you for thinking of me, as a creative. Literature. So I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. I come from a migrant family in Calcutta. So my grandfather and great grandfather had emigrated to West Bengal from Varanasi, Uttar Pradesh. However, my father was born and educated in Varanasi, and subsequently he was one of the first postgraduate uh, from his native village, while his father, as in my grandfather, was still working in Calcutta. So my father eventually emigrated full time to West Bengal. Before him, my grandfather was working in Calcutta and traveling back and forth between Uttar Pradesh and Calcutta. I was born in a joint family in Calcutta. We lived pretty close to the city, near Park Street, Rabindra Sadan to be precise. And then subsequently we moved to Behala. I had a very interesting upbringing, though we were surrounded by chaste Hindi speaking, academically driven Pandit family from Uttar Pradesh. However, I was surrounded by, firstly, by the premier of the elite living in Calcutta in near Rabindra Sadan and Park Street, and eventually to Behala, where a lot of refugee Bangladeshis were also living, and also a lot of hardcore Bengalis, who were from varied backgrounds were living very pretty close to the place that I used to live in. It was pretty close to both Tollygunge as well as New Alipur. I attended I attended a missionary school in central Calcutta, and then eventually a Birla school in Behala. So my orientation to literature was all because of either my family or my gurus in school. Firstly, Julian Day at Elgin Road, and then eventually MP Birla School in Calcutta in Behala, where I was blessed by some very good teachers who gave us this orientation to various literature. I picked up interest in reading the mythological stories, as were narrated by my mother and my grandmother, uh, some other elderly members in my family. And then eventually I picked up interest in reading Charles Dickens and Arthur Conan Doyle's, created stories. I also picked up interest in reading Tagore and Satyajit Ray's works as well, without realizing they were, what kind of gems they were. I was a little boy back then. So yes, and eventually I picked up interest in reading Frederick Fawcett, the crime thriller mastermind. Yes, thank you.
So that brings me. Do you read Bengali too?
So
Do you
no,
read
I did not
Bengali?
read Bengali. The third language that I studied was Sanskrit, besides Hindi and English. But Bengali, I used to read the translated work in Bengali, and I was a big fan of actually reading, some of the creations by Satyajit Ray. But again, these were articles or these were stories that were really incorporated in the newspapers back then. On some of the pages of the newspapers, we used to have these translated stories especially mythological and fable stories were my favorite segment. I did watch a few films, like Gopi Gain and Bagabain, the fun films created by Satyajit Ray. I didn't realize the master that he was at his work. I didn't realize many things back then. I also picked up interest in reading, stories on Byomkesh Bakshi and eventually the television serial.
Crime writer.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
So as I said, Frederick Fawcett was one of my favorite, genre of story writer, and through him, I used to transport to the world, to the UK, and also through stories of Charles Dickens and others.
So what do you read now? Your reading habits, have they changed in terms of content? Or do you read something different nowadays?
I think my reading habits have probably remained same. Though I'm a voracious reader. I like to read on all subjects, and that is how I start my mornings and I end my nights as well. I read anything that is of interest to me on that particular day. I also like to explore. Okay, and I have to tell you this, that back in the day when I was growing up, though my family is very pro academic, and everyone either is an engineer or a doctor or or a chartered accountant in the family or from the finance background, but I was not very bright in my school days. I was fairly average. But eventually I realized a trait about myself, that I belong to a category of learners who learn by watching, who learn by doing, who learn by experimenting with things. I think that is probably a category of learners as well, that you learn by doing things. Yeah, and that is how I picked up interest in reading about how things are done. I was interested in how rockets are launched in the space, or how a boat made of wood or metal floats on the water. So these things intrigued me. Geography used to be one of my favorite subjects, through which I used to explore. When my teacher used to talk about flora and fauna and all of that stuff, I was more interested in wanting to go and explore and see the world outside my birth city of Calcutta. So unless I see it, I wouldn't believe it. So yeah, and that has remained so even today. There are various subjects that I read. I like to read mostly about science and technology, because I believe I'm into a kind of creative field where technology plays a major role, and one needs to ever evolve and ever learn from the technological advancements that is happening. So I read stuff like those that interest me.
But you other than reading, you write too.
I write,
So
yes.
but you write poetry and prose both.
That's right, Dada. I enjoy writing, but I think a lot of my writing is also inspired from uh, the stories that I read as a child, as a formative child. I used to read a lot of Hindi literature when I was a little boy, especially Premchand, Jaishankar Prasad, and then also uh, poetry work by Nirala, by Dinkar. Dinkar is my favorite poet till date. Uh, the kind of upbringing I was having, unfortunately, I did not read a lot of Bengali literature back in the day. I read a lot of adapted work, and also back back in the school days, we were scared. The reason why Bengali was not my third language was because we were scared to take Bengali as a language to learn, uh, because we were told that it's a very difficult language to learn, and you will not score in that subject. However, I used to play cricket, and I picked up the language while playing cricket. So I can speak Bangla, but I can't read or write. I can read a bit, like destinations written on the bus stops or on the buses, like that. Yeah. So a lot of my stories are also inspired from these childhood experiments and experiences that I had. Also, despite growing up in a joint family, I was a loner at heart who liked to observe the world around him. So that has remained so even today. I like to observe the passing world around me, whether in chaos, whether in order, and I like to pen my thoughts. I prefer writing poetry to stories, uh, because I think I'm able to express my thoughts, my emotions in lesser words. In lesser
Mm,
words,
mm, mm.
you can write a whole story of, worth 1,000 words, but the essence
Mm.
remains same, the emotion remains same. You want to convey something, and I think that can be conveyed even in few lines.
So, do you have a collection coming up, or do you want to publish your works? Do you think about that?
Right, Dada. Yes. So I've written quite a few poetry since my early childhood. I've penned them in my diary, and I regularly recite poetry podcast, where I not only recite poetry from by other poets, English, Hindi, namely to start with. I also recite my own created poetry. With regards to stories, so far I have published on. It's available on Amazon and Kindle. I've published a collection of 4 short stories, and these are all the 4 stories are different on different theme, family theme, crime again, supernatural. Yeah, and I'm looking. I mean, I have no set targets really, Dada.
Mhm. Mm.
I just enjoy the process. I enjoy the creative process. It's very hard for me to quantify it. I enjoy the process. Uh, uh, Even the short films that I make or the music videos I make, I
Yeah.
try to convey a story through that. So I want my audience, when they watch it, they try to understand the undertone, the undercurrent of the story, flowing out. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but coming back to the photography and videos, and when did that start? At what point in time did that start in your life?
Right. Okay. So, as I said, that I was learning to be a finance professional. To be honest, back in the day, my father was a very bright accountant, and uh, and he became very successful in his professional career because of his academic and because of his credential merit as a student and as a professional as well. So his expectation was that either the child becomes an engineer or a chartered accountant. So I was learning to be a finance professional back in the school days. However, as I mentioned about myself, that I belong to a category of learners who learn by watching, who learn by doing things, which is why I also call myself a DIY filmmaker, do it yourself filmmaker. Um, so I was struggling back in the school days and back in college days because
Mm.
uh, academic or the education in that strictest terms was not interesting me, and it was purely out of my disinterest that I did not want to pursue a career, a full-time career, either as an engineer, doctor, or a chartered accountant. And I was somehow pulled towards the audiovisual medium. I don't know since when. I think probably the first film that I saw as a child was actually on a black and white television, Sholay.
Mhm.
So I think Sholay pulled me, mag, you know, mag, magnificently towards the audiovisual storytelling process, and I
Mm.
was very intrigued. Subsequently, I and we were growing up in Calcutta. I think maybe in Calcutta we watched more films, we watched more television serials than even Bombay. I'm married to a woman,
Mm.
married to a
Mm.
girl from Bombay, and when we compare our childhood, I
Mm.
think people probably outside Mumbai were watching television serials more, watching
Mhm.
films more. So I picked up my interest from there. And right after my graduation, uh, I wanted to pursue storytelling. I wanted to do this. So I applied for a film studies course to learn the formal aspect of filmmaking. And my elder brother supported that thought. So subsequently, I joined this film school where I was studying with some PhD students uh, who wanted to, become a major in either mass communication or media studies. And I was truly blessed. Back then, Dada, I was under the tutelage of Father Gaston Roberge, who is considered an authority in mass media. in the, at least in the eastern region of our country, India, home country. And also one of our senior faculty members was Abhik Mukherjee, who is also the director of photography of films like Pink, Badla, October, uh, basically Shujit Sarkar's films. The much recent work, one of his much recent work is Sardar Udham Singh, if you have watched that film. So I was immediately, thrown into a world where I had these competitive and very competent, storytellers who were teaching us, and truly blessed. So I think it started from there in 2001, but eventually some financial difficulties in the family pushed me again to, continue doing what I was doing. I became a finance professional initially, and then eventually I became a project management professional. I left Calcutta at an early age, around 21, moved to Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai, UK, and now Australia. But but I never dropped the bat. I never dropped the hat actually on storytelling techniques. I used to do a lot of vlogs, home videos all this while,
Mhm.
and I picked up. I the first time I edited a video was actually home video of my daughter's fifth birthday. So at that time, I must have scraped through some 30 gigs of videos that I had shot over a period of time. Since the day she was born to eventually when she turned 5. And so that process was very interesting. And after I edited and put out a video to my family, everyone enjoyed it. So I thought that okay, that storytelling, that fire is still burning, somewhere within me, and I should probably, continue doing it. So that was back in 2015. I immigrated to Australia in 2016, and I made my first short film in 2017.
Most of us are, in our creative journeys, are influenced by different people in different areas. So, would you have filmmakers who have influenced you or your style of filmmaking?
Thank you, Dada. Before filmmakers, I think I'm a poet at heart. So I will definitely like to talk about the poets, or the kind of people who have inspired me into my storytelling, creative storytelling. So starting with Tagore, okay, and even Satyajit Ray, some of his works is literally a poetry in motion. Uh, so Tagore, Satyajit Ray, uh, to start with, and then Premchand, Dinkar. So they were my initial, torchbearers who inspired me. Then eventually, I think I became fond of Sippi films because of Sholay, Shan, and some of the films that I watched. Eventually, when I started liking the technical aspects, I became a big fan of Shankar Nag, who created Malgudi Days. And also, I I thoroughly enjoyed making of Mahabharat. So I've watched a lot of tutorials and videos on how they created Mahabharat. So again, became a big fanboy of B.R. Chopra gang, B.R. Chopra camp, Yashraj Chopra. I also enjoyed films during my film studies course. I was initiated to world aspect of filmmaking, and that at that point I watched a lot of international films, especially films which did not make it to academy awards, but were still considered
Mm.
masterpiece. So I was exposed to a lot of world cinema at that point in time. I think one of the film that remained very close to me, and this I read about a lot of filmmakers, that one film that possibly made you, pick up the camera yourself and start. I think there are two films in my case. One is Breathless by Jean-Luc Godard. It was a French film that I watched as a student filmmaker, which completely shocked me. And, it remained in a very haunting way, etched in my memory, that an audiovisual media can spellbind you in a way Breathless did to me as a young student of cinema. And eventually I think in 2015, when I was not pursuing storytelling or filmmaking in the way that I do now, is probably Bahubali. After I watched Bahubali and especially the Dhivra song, and I looked up tutorials on how that song was made, how that song was shot, I was absolutely amazed. In the mindset of Rajamouli, how he conceived that song, and how eventually he transported or translated that on the audiovisual media. I also follow a lot of DIY filmmakers like David Sandberg, Brandon Lee, Anurag Kashyap, Ram Gopal Verma, and everybody's works inspires me.
Hmm, hmm. Now, you sometimes have to work with other directors. So when you do that, do you strictly follow the director's guidelines, or do you introduce or try and introduce your own ideas into the film, or into a scene or a concept?
Right. Yes, I think storytelling, and especially filmmaking, is a very collaborative teamwork
Mm,
that everybody's inputs are very welcome and very important. However, I think film is a director's medium. So therefore, one should not interfere or one should not influence the director's vision. So therefore, I've worked with a lot of directors, a lot of filmmakers here in Sydney now. When I was looking at my filmmaking work, I've created 32 short films so far, out of which only 12 short films I have created for my own self. All the rest of the work is either for some other filmmakers in Sydney locally. So I don't try to influence them with my perception, with my ideas, with my vision. I like to, go about their vision as in my technical capacity. But a lot of film directors also give me that space. Creators, especially, I don't want to one name because then I will be unfair to the others. But I think uh, the individuals that I choose to work with, I should say, are very, very receptive and very reciprocal of my vision also, and which is why the reason we work so much in harmony. So therefore, we are able to churn out a better work. We are able to,
mm,
co-produce a better work together. However, having said that, it's a director's medium and one should not influence it.
sure, sure. No, but when you work for yourself, what's your method? Do you I've seen directors, I've worked with people who have worked off, they create a storyboard first and then they get behind the lens. But I've seen you work too. So what is your methodology? Do you work off a storyboard, or do you just go on the fly?
I adopt a variety of methods really, but for the kind of work that I'm doing. So, for example, when I'm doing my lone walking videos, so lone walking videos are absolute abstract videos, which
Mhm.
when I'm recording those videos, I don't even know, when or for what purpose I'm going to be using them. So then I'm not following any structured storyboard at that point in time. When I'm making a music video uh, for a musician, for a singer, at that point in time, together we collaborate and come up with some ideas. We pen those thoughts and we structure it, and then eventually we shoot it, and we create the final music video. However, when I'm creating my own short film, I'm truly blessed that I have a wonderful family that is so participative. My wife also comes from the film capital of my home country, India, and she grew up in a suburb of Mumbai where she was surrounded by all film stars. So, and she has seen a lot of film process happening or unfolding on the streets. So she also understands and is very interested and participative in my madness. And also my kids, my two girls, have also taken interest after my creative pursuits. So it's a collaborative process again, especially for films that I create under my banner Euphony Films. All the 12 films were very thoughtfully penned and structured, storyboarded, and thought out. And eventually, we spent a lot of time, at least 75% time, ideating on the post production after we completed our pre-production. This is it. I think as a method, it's very important that you distribute that time, evenly between all the aspects of filmmaking, so that your post production becomes smooth.
Yeah. Talking about in the area of post production, I think editing is arguably one of the most complex processes in filmmaking. In fact, editing can make or break a movie. Um, Even if the story is good, a good director, good camera work, but the editing is not good, it can break it up. Now, you edit your own films, and it's a complex process. Tell us something about it. How complex is editing, and what technologies do you use for editing?
Right. Okay. I think every story, every audiovisual story, especially narrative, no, not even narrative. I think all forms of storytelling, Dada, is once conceived uh, at the writing stage, and then eventually the second time it is again reborn. It is born again on the edit table. Uh, yes. So sometimes you'll be surprised that a few ideas that we penned at the writing stage eventually turned out to be more amplified, much more amplified at the edit stage. Yeah. So it is very complex. I use variety of technology platform. As I said, I'm technology. I don't know whether that phrase is right, but technology nerd myself. I like to experiment with a lot of tools that are available on the market. And however, from a storytelling point of view, I'm very technology and tool agnostic. I want to tell the story. So to achieve the final outcome, I work backwards. So if I have something in mind, for example, when I knew that I'm creating this film from assignment, where at the end I knew that it will be revealed that one of the main subject that was interacting all this while with the serial killer is a spirit, and he will vanish in thin air. So I knew that the climax of my film, and I had to work backwards, and I learned it by attending seminars, virtual conferences of how I can achieve that result. I don't know everything, and I don't think anybody can boast that he knows everything, especially on the technology side, because things are so changing and so dynamic. So I learned it by attending those seminars and conferences, and eventually I was able to, create that effect. So I spend a lot of time, I which I don't know if my viewers realize. I spend a lot of time in my editing studio, and sometimes it is absolutely maddening.
Yeah,
So,
it's a time consuming process, and I believe that it also needs a lot of imagination. I
lot
think
of creativity. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I
yes,
think it
what that.
is like a blank canvas that you start with
Mm,
again.
mm,
Despite your
mm.
storyboarding, despite all your
Yeah,
best efforts on pre-production, you start again like a painter, on a black on a absolute blank screen, and then you have to recreate, you have to translate the vision of the story, that was initially penned in either in the same way or in a much refined way. So I think it's a very niche work as well, niche job. And I think I'm truly blessed that my orientation, my education in filmmaking, and all the seminars and conferences and tutorials that I've watched, attended, helps me in that process.
yes, of course. Education is a lifelong process for anything you do. I believe that strongly. Now, the communities know you as a filmmaker and a videographer, and you've always said that your pleasure lies behind the lenses all the time. But I can see a guitar behind you. I was wondering if there are other areas of creativity that you indulge in that people may not know about.
Right. No, I'm trying to learn guitar, but and I've been to be honest, Dada, I've been trying to learn guitar since my childhood, but I still can't play it very well. I
Mhm.
I can't play it. Okay, I'm trying to teach my younger ones, my girls, some musical instruments, especially the keyboard, because I think keyboard is probably the most important weapon for a storyteller, for a filmmaker. Most of the stuff for filmmaking is truly done on keyboard. So that is another area. However, I do have a keen interest in creating background music for my own films. Coming from a city like Calcutta, I think one is blessed to be surrounded by music and creative pursuits all around. So I've developed this keen ear for good music. I think in my spare time, I dabble with a lot of loop music,
Mhm.
or tunes or jingles or instruments on digital audio workflow uh, stations, DAWs or DG equipments, MIDI equipments, or apps like GarageBand and Reaper and Audacity, where I mix and master a lot of background effect, and I try to experiment. I think that is also a very creative way to uh, tell your story, because it's an audiovisual medium that you're dabbling with. So I think in my spare time, that's what I enjoy doing most. I like to listen to a lot of uh, trance music. I listen to a lot of BGMs and hip hop and blues and all kinds of rhythmic rhymes, and try to mix and master. So you will notice that the films that I have written, directed, I try to do my own background music as well. So that is one area that I don't talk about much.
Yeah, no, no, this is good to know because music does help. Knowledge of music does help all filmmakers, right from Satyajit Roy, and he himself used to play, of course, and he used to write the
Masterful.
scores at night. Yeah, after he shot the movie. So yeah, music always helps, gives you a better understanding of various. All right. We all have our dreams, and we all look into our own future. Most of us, especially creatives, have this bad habit of looking into the future all the time. I'm sure you must be having some dreams, plans, objectives going forward. What do you think as a creative? How do you see the future panning out for yourself? What do you want to do, and where do you want to go?
I thought of this question before, Dada. Uh, the best way to answer this, uh, when someone asks me, what is your end goal, especially regarding films, I often tell them that I want to make a feature film, which I want everyone to watch, which the world watches, and they take notice of local independent filmmakers who are not from the regular rigor, who are not from any industry, and are still able to do that. But I think that is probably just an aspiration. That is not my end goal. I think my end goal is I create uh, stories uh, that creates some difference in people's lives, um, touches you, emotionally touches you, and inspires you to enjoy this beautiful life in a much more holistic way. I think that brings me true joy. I think that brought me true joy when I read The January Night by Premchand, as a young boy, or I read stories uh, by Jaishankar Prasad, or other story writers, of 80s that I read. And also today, when I read poetry by some of the lyricists like Manoj Muntashir, uh, and the rest, or stories unfolding, like for example, uh, some of the works by Rajkumar Hirani, his films. Uh, so I think that is the kind of work that I want to do, which creates that positive difference in people's lives, and also uh, they find the environment around them much more meaningful and beautiful. I think probably that made me so passionate in creating several concert videos, several festival videos, because I was thinking that what was the reason for doing so much work, so much videos. I was literally, I remember between 2019 and 2020, Dada, I was almost out every Friday, filming either a concert or a theater play or some festival. So I was thinking that why am I doing this? I work in a 9 to 5 environment. I have a small family to look after. What is motivating me, to go out every Friday? But I realized that the joy it was bringing to people uh, after seeing the final video, going rounds on social media. I think that joy was my ignition, my fuel. So with that thought, I think I would like to grow old watching my own created videos and films on a big screen, sitting with my grandchildren. I think that will bring me maximum joy. Yeah.
That is a fine objective, Pankaj. Believe me.
Thank you, Dada.
If you watch, going forward in the end of your career, you can look back and look at your own works and enjoy them. They are worth more than hundreds of thousands of people watching it. Believe me, especially with your grandkids. Yeah,
Thank you.
It's a fine objective.
Thank you. I must add here. People like you. Okay, especially Dada, you inspire. You know, uh, I would like to retain that childlike enthusiasm in my pursuits of creativity, just like you have. With your decades of experience in variety of techniques of and creative pursuits, and being an academic yourself, you have retained the same childlike enthusiasm. And this is the talk that I do whenever I'm talking about you with some of my beloved inner circle. That is what I tell, what I say, that I want to have that same childlike enthusiasm for creative pursuits, just like Dada Avijit.
Oh, thank you. As I always say, keep your heart young. Don't ever tell yourself.
Thank you for inspiring not just me. I think thank you for inspiring so many local Hindi
writers. That's very kind of you.
With your passion, with your love for creativity, Dada. And I think it remains. I mean, these little nuances everyone notices, and if you don't notice that little detail, then you're not a creative. So yeah, I notice it, we notice it, and thank you for inspiring.
Thank you. And that was a fantastic discussion, Pankaj, and I hope the viewers find things that are revealing about you, which they probably didn't know about. So thank you, Pankaj. It was absolutely amazing and very intriguing too, all things that you told us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dada. It was a pleasure and honor. Thank you.